if we go from enforcement mechanism to the question of transparency, one of the questions which was going to be asked, as I said just before, we've been discussing transparency a bit, as well as traceability as being tools with regards to these enforcement mechanisms. But what I wanted to ask you is, what do actors involved? So we're talking about both the RSPO, and we're talking about corporations, and we're also talking about NGOs, could do to improve transparency in terms of their practices.
Well, there's a number of tools that are available when we look at transparency. I wouldn't know where to start. I mean, I mentioned before the one that is peculiar that the RSPO has, which is this system of making the concession boundaries, so the areas where the companies operate, transparent online, so you can overlay data layers such as deforestation and fires, and understand what is happening where the company is operating. Of course, there's transparency in dealing with complaints. For example, we've touched upon this. One of the requirements of the RSPO is for companies to have a grievance mechanism, and also to comply to the grievance mechanism of the RSPO, which is a transparent mechanism. So, for example, if you have an issue related to a company, this would be dealt with between the complainant and the complainee, through a system that is transparent and of which every step and process is made public online. I think maybe one thing that I could say about this is that yes, transparency is important, but again, we need to know that it comes with a cost, which is the cost of seeing the issues. So if we look at the issues, which my personal opinion is that we should try and work to encourage companies that are trying to move in the right direction, and not only use a stick approach, or as well as not only use a carrot approach, because as we know, it doesn't work. We're humans, and we work with a balance of both. So that's I think the comment I have to make.
Great, thank you. Because I think, well, as you say, well, the question of transparency is important, but do you think that customers would be less inclined to buy with a corporation that has had problem in the past if this corporation shows that it's making improvements? I was thinking I'll be asking this to Ms. Kong and Mr. Toth from Ferrero, because in their palm oil progress reports from 2015 and 2016, Ferrero has explained that they've had a lot of problems in terms of their enforcement and the implementation of the verification protocol with a few suppliers, and as a result, they've had major changes. I think it's been a change with 50% of their suppliers. So do you think that's actually a good step from corporations, showing such transparency, and that they're making efforts, they're stopping their contracts with certain suppliers in order to make sure that they're promoting the respect of human rights and a good implementation in this case?
Yeah. That's a very good question. Sorry for not responding to this before, when you asked. I think one thing that I would like to say is we did a study with the focus groups on RSPO and the way we're operating in Europe in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, and where we actually tackled this issue. So how would consumer feel about something that is not perfect but is improving, right? And basically what we found out of the results of that study is that if you have a focus group discussion of about 30 to 40 minutes with the consumers, they do understand it, and they kind of, you know, approve this way of moving the industry, for example. The issue that we have today is that the decisions that are made when you buy a product are made in 2 seconds, 2 or 3 seconds. So I wish I had the solution for that, of explaining that the issues and what companies are doing and what organizations are doing, that doesn't take 30 minutes, but take 2 seconds. And I think that's the role of organizations such as RSPO, okay, but also as organizations like the civil society or NGOs that are talking directly to consumers, that kind of act as the expert that the consumers can trust. Now, what consumers can know, it depends on the consumers, and I don't think we should expect every consumers to have the will or the ability to go in depth into understanding how a company is operating, and you know, how every single product that they buy is you know, traceable to where, what are the social issues that are linked to this, and that's where RSPO comes in. And I understand that this comes with a it comes with an inner fault, which is that of putting a logo that, however you promote, might seem as perfection, and to the eyes of the consumers, and in reality, sometimes perfection is not. What we try and do in the RSPO is to make sure that this information about complaints, for example, about the issues that we're facing, about the instances in which things have gone wrong, is very clearly available on our website. So you will see that if a consumer accesses the RSPO website, for example, the complaints page is very easily accessible. Yeah. So and all the information about complaints is there. So yeah, I think there's always ways to improve, and that's the approach that we have taken so far.
Good, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Pai.
No way in. Okay. We have to be clear. It's not, consumers don't buy palm oil. Yeah, consumers buy products where palm oil is used to produce some of it. So the buyers of palm oil are the corporations who use it in their productions: Unilever, Nestle, etc., the big ones. Yeah. Now, their primary motivation is a marketing one, a public relations one. So they want to be able to show that their product is sustainable and have this sort of image to so that they can, you know, sell their stuff. And it's not, so this is a slightly different term, yeah, than transparency. Yeah, it's, I mean, if you look at advertising campaigns, it's not about transparency. It's about, you know, plugging into emotions to try and make the consumers buy your product. It's not about truth. Okay. Now, and I think this applies a lot to the RSPO now, or to the certification strategy. So Stefano said it himself. No? The consumer sees the logo saying it's sustainable palm oil. So, you know, I've heard about, you know, this problem in the media, and so I'm going to buy, you know, so now everything's fine because I can, you know, buy a product which has this logo on it. But if you were to ask someone who made that decision, who, you know, is perhaps worried about his or her, you know, consumption, etc., whether they think a 5,000 or 10,000 hectare monoculture, yeah, is sustainable, they'd probably disagree. So it's a kind of, it's basically a marketing exercise, which is of course connected to principles and criteria, but this is already defined via the RSPO. So I don't think it's really an open debate. So I think the transparency, it's sort of it's a buzzword. It's a term that corporations like to use themselves, but you know, it's just as much as about misinformation as about truth.
I don't disagree with what Oliver's saying at a fundamental level. I think, you know, there is, you know, when it comes to the brand's incentive for, you know, dealing with consumers, it is, you know, it is very much an image issue. And where I think the discussion we need to focus is when we're discussing, you know, the RSPO, you know, the RSPO does have a principles and criteria. It has standards. It does have an auditing system. It does have people at the RSPO who are, I think, trying their best to make the standard as strong as possible, and make sure that the companies who are certified are actually implementing the standard. But I think there is a challenge at the RSPO when it can be shown with quite a bit of evidence that an RSPO certified grower is is not meeting the standard, yeah, that the organization is willing to use the stick. You know, and the stick here, as Oliver points out, is it could be suspending the membership of the organization, of the producer, or kicking them out of the RSPO. And I think it's important for the credibility of a certification initiative that it be willing, that it shows itself that it's willing to suspend or kick out members who are not meeting the standard. We have a current case where we filed a complaint against a company called IndoAgri that is not meeting the RSPO's labor criteria, is not meeting many of the environmental criteria, and that we believe does not deserve to sell certified sustainable palm oil. We believe they're not meeting the standard and that they are not committed to meeting the standard. And unfortunately, we filed a complaint with the RSPO now almost 2 years ago. And the complaints panel has been very slow to review and investigate the complaint. And the problem is that in the meantime, IndoAgri has continued to sell sustainable certified palm oil. They haven't felt any impact. And so far the complaint system at the RSPO is quite weak. And I think for its credibility, the RSPO needs to, there need to be consequences when a member is failing repeatedly to implement the principles and criteria. And this is not, we are not RSPO members, but I think everybody who is a member of the RSPO needs to be concerned about that.
Thanks. I'd like to pick up on the comment. I'm aware of the complaint. Well, first, let me speak about the suspension and termination and the use of the stick. So I'd like to make one comment on this, which is that we've had major cases of suspensions of RSPO members in the past. And as a matter of fact, we have cases every year also just in terms of non-submission of annual communication of progress. So you can see this on our website. It happens quite often. I would also make another comment, which is about engagement. And this is a difficult area where to decide on when to stop to engage. But I have examples from the past, in the beginning of the RSPO, where we had members, prominent Indonesian plantation members, that because of the risk of facing a complaint left the RSPO, and I can tell you that they're not any worse off in the market today. So that's an issue that we face. We face the issue that where there is RSPO, where there is a complaint, there's an avenue for recourse that otherwise is missing. Yeah, and that's why we work with complainant and complainees until we see that there's a will from both parties to reach a solution of the complaint. On the specific matter of IndoAgri, yes, the complaint is open. Actually, there was a field verification done last week. So there should be a report coming out for discussion of the complaints panel soon, where I think a decision is going to be made. We'll see what that's going to be, but it's important to follow process. So that's the same process that we follow when we have a bad situation is the process that we follow when we have a good situation. So the same way we shouldn't give a certification too easily just because we have some parties saying that the company is behaving very well. We need to be careful of following the process when that's the different case. I also would like to make a comment that the issue of the length of the complaint is not only due to the system of the RSPO, which yes, is as its mechanics, but for example, there was limitations that we had to solve on how we were aware, and the complaint panel was made aware of the location of the complaint that limited our availability to have a verification done on site. So it's, the point I would like to make is, yes, it's long, but it's not long because people are not trying. It's long because there are systems, and it's important in this, to make sure that we follow system if we want to be consistent the way we operate. So that's a comment I would like to make. One other comment I would like to make is, I think it's a privileged situation to be in, where there is a body that you can push on and criticize and move. And I think we should keep always this in our head, because the question is, we've talked about the imperfections of RSPO. I haven't heard any comment about a system that would be better than this, or that would work better. I know that POIG, for example, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, works on a different standard, but on the same principles of verification, of third-party auditing, for example, or having a standard to be accounted for. And I'm pretty sure that if applied at scale, that standard would have very similar issues. And to be honest, we've had instances in the past where, because RSPO has a complaint system, some members also of POIG have been made accountable through the RSPO system because of this. So I wonder if we are falling into the trap of, criticizing something and eventually potentially abandoning something to fall into the process of rebuilding it again with the will of making something that is probably going to be better 10 years from now. I'm not sure. I mean, that probably we won't know. I wonder if we should also sometimes, especially the people that are doing the good work in monitoring companies' behavior, in understanding that, there's people also in corporations sometimes. And one of the things that we are starting to see lacking is the support on the good progress that has been made, despite small. I think what I can say is that we're not seeing that so much, especially from the reward from the market. So that's something that we are missing. So getting people to make sure that, if a product is certified, for example, if a product is done sustainably, then it's demanded by the markets. And that is something that is not always happening, yeah? And I think it's probably the best way to change the supply chain, being a change, would be to pull it, rather than try and push it from the production side, but to pull it with the demand for sustainable produced commodities.